Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all. My name is Aubri Kinghorn. I work at Esri. I am on an ArcGIS Pro development team, and my team is responsible for layouts. And so I think about legends a lot at work. And so when I was getting my master's degree, it made sense that when I was going to think about what to research, legends came to mind. Why do I think about legends so much? Well, because they're kind of problematic. Of course, not all maps need legends, as I'm sure you guys are very familiar with, but some maps do. And sometimes you have a spec that you have to design to that requires a legend, whether or not you think the map needs it or not. What I've discovered is that creating legends in a mapping software is challenging. Creating them in Illustrator is supposedly easy. I wouldn't know because I'm really bad at using Illustrator, but I've heard that other people can do it. And so I was trying to think, why is creating legends in a mapping software, be it an online mapping software, ArcGIS Pro, QGIS, anything, why is it challenging? And what I discovered is there's a lot of variations in legends, but we don't have a lot of words to talk about that. We talk about legends, and when you read through cartography books and when you do literature reviews, they have some ideas, maybe don't put the word legend on it, maybe, don't add extra stuff, and these are great ideas. But what we don't talk about is that different maps and different mapping subjects might need different kinds of legends, and those different legends have different needs. And until we understand that, software companies don't really know how to support them, and so they can't give us the experience that I think you all deserve. I think we should be able to enjoy making legends instead of maybe that not being our favorite part. Or maybe it's just me. So my solution was to identify types of legends in 2D printed maps. I wish I could have expanded. I would love to look at web maps and 3D maps, but it was also very important to me that I graduate on time, so we had to put some limits. I chose 2D and printed. And so I'm going to use the same definition for print that the presenters before me did. These are maps that are designed to be printed, even if you may only ever view them digitally as a PDF. So I looked at about 600 legends, and I analyzed them, and I broke them down into their pieces, and I looked at what was similar and what was different. And between all of that, I came up with 11 different legends types. I'm not saying this is a complete list, but I think it's a good starting point, and so I want to share those with you. I would love to talk about the methodology, but this is a 15-minute talk, and I have 11 legend types, so if you're interested in how I did this or have thoughts, please come and find me afterwards. Okay, but before I get to legend types, we should probably clarify a few things. We need some definitions. This was actually one of the first things I did when I was breaking down legends, was define components that I was commonly seeing. The first is a ramp, and a ramp is just a block of color that has no spaces. So it could be like this one, which is gradient, or it could actually have dividing between the colors, but the important piece is that there are no spaces. Another thing that I saw a lot that I'd never heard anyone talked about is what I call mixed columns. You would see a lot of legends that have like 2 columns, and then below it there would be a space with 3 columns, and then below it 2 columns again. Great way to utilize space. Interesting challenge for software. Another thing that's really cool is what I call a natural element, and this is a small sample geography with lots of different symbols on it, and then arrows or lines pointing out those symbols. So you get to see the symbols in context. It's very useful. Again, not something I'd ever seen talked about in any of my cartography textbooks. I also discovered there are 2 kinds of text in legends that I commonly saw. One is explanatory text, and this is where there's text on the patch shape itself that provides more information. Very common in geology maps. You can see that Cretaceous is represented with a K, and so you need both of those pieces of information. Another thing, if you go over a little bit, is example text. Example text is usually used for street signs, and this is just made up text that shows you that this symbol on the map will have some sort of text on it, and that text will mean something. Again, highway signs, street signs are very common. And finally, we have what I call multipatch, and this is when you have one line and it has multiple symbols on it. Again, this is a great space saver, but not something I'd ever seen software do really well. Okay, now that we have some definitions, let's look at the types of legends I found. The first is what I call simple. You have one patch or symbol. I'm going to call symbols patches, same thing, and one text item that describes them. There's nothing additional, nothing fancy, you don't get all crazy. These are done in one language, and they are the only type that I found equally in reference maps and thematic maps. They are also the only type of legend that I would say every software I've worked with supports pretty well. If you want to do something really basic, you can probably get your software to do it out of the box, and that's awesome. Then we get to the fun part. So I've then discovered that really legends come into two boxes. There are legends that are for reference maps and legends that are for thematic maps, which makes sense. Reference maps, like our street maps, Google Earth, etc., have very different needs than thematic maps, where you're showing, cases of COVID or housing or anything like that. And so we're going to start with reference legends, and I'll walk you through what I found. The first is what I called centered patch, and this is when you have all your symbols or patches in the middle, and then you have text on either side. This is very common when you have a legend done in multiple languages, because you can easily add multiple languages. You could have 2 languages, 4 languages, and it's very readable. So this was something I saw a lot, so I call those centered patch legends. The next is what I call reference multipatch. These legends are complex. They have many, many items. I usually found them on military maps or other government-style maps where they're trying to cram a lot of information. The defining features I noticed tend to have a natural element. They'll actually show some things in context, which is really nice. They usually have multi-patches because you're trying to fit a lot of information in a small area. They can be multilingual. One of my favorites is in English and Thai, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And they often use either dots or solid lines to go from the text to the patch. This is really helpful when you're trying to make sense of a lot of information. So those are some common things in reference multi-patch legends. The next one I actually didn't name. This was defined by DeLucia and Hiller in 1982. It's called a natural legend. And this is where you essentially make up your own geography with all the symbols on it in your map, and then you label those symbols. And it is easy to read, it's intuitive, it's beautiful, and it's incredibly time-consuming. So there aren't a lot of these, but you know what? If you really want to make another map, this is a great option. Have fun. They're really beautiful. And finally, I just had some legends that didn't really fit anywhere else. So I call them complex reference legends. And these, I've noticed, often include mixed columns, and they have additional text. So people are trying to add text that isn't just, a descriptor or consistent on all legend items. It's random. It might be something. They may also have broken off symbols. You need a lot of control over alignment and text when you make a complex reference legend. All right, let's switch gears and talk about thematic maps and thematic legends. The first group that I found is Descriptive Polygon, and I called this type Descriptive Polygon because these legends tend to only have polygons. Maybe a few lines, but mostly polygons. And they have explanatory text on the patch. These legends are also usually really big, and they are really commonly recognized because they're on most geologic maps. However, I did discover these are great for mapping or for displaying a lot of natural phenomena. So if you want to do biomes or other things, a descriptive polygon legend is really a useful tool. They have a lot of text, probably more text than any other legend type I saw. The next is what I call thematic ramps with text. And so these always have a ramp. That's why it's in their name. And the ramp is labeled with text. These legends tend to be dominated by just the ramp. They might have a few other pieces, as you can see in that lower legend with the proposed reservoirs, but they tend to be dominated by just the ramp and then some text explaining it. So that numbers or exact divisions aren't usually as important here as general groups. Then we switch gears a little bit and get into thematic classes with numbers. Thematic classes with numbers legends, the labeling needs to be a lot more precise. The groups matter more. There are actually specific variations here, and so they use numbers. And from a software perspective, this is really important because when you start using numbers in your legends, you need to support lots of different kinds of number formatting. Do you want to do rounding? Do you want to do decimals? Do you want to do fractions? There's so many options that come into play when you're working with groups like this. Not to mention, you really want this to be very dynamic so that if you change your groups, you know that your legend will reflect it as well. Again, these usually have a ramp, but sometimes you'll just have classes that aren't in a ramp, as shown in the, what is that, persons per square kilometer legend. Okay, the next two are similar, so they got on the same slide, but they are technically different, and these are legends specific to a mapping technique. They are I-identified proportional symbol and bivariate. Of course, as new mapping techniques get more popular, there will probably be more legends like this. These tend to have a small number of items, and they're very specific needs to their mapping techniques. So for proportional symbol, you'll see nested legends, you'll see things that are horizontally aligned, vertically aligned. They all have unique text needs because the text is in a different place than if you saw, a standard point line or polygon. Same with bivariate. Bivariate has some really cool stuff. You might want to change the angle. You have different text options there. And these are very different than, again, a standard point line, polygon, or raster. And finally, we also have a catch-all for thematic mapping. Why didn't I use the same catch-all as I did for reference mapping? Because thematic mapping goes a lot crazier. I've discovered that most of you here at NACIS have probably built a legend in this category. It's where you do whatever you want. You mess with size, you add cool graphics, you change the columns, the alignments, the fonts. Anything you can think of can become a complex thematic legend. The changing of size is my favorite. This Map Details legend by Sarah Bell is one of my all-time favorites, where she did a lot of cool things to draw detail into what is important. So in conclusion, why does this matter? Because until we really understand and break down legends, I don't think we can really understand how to build better software, better design, or even just talk about them. So I think by looking at them a little bit more, by using some language that people could use, that we can think about how to build better legends and how to have a better legend building experience. I am very aware that this work is not perfect by any means, and I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think and how it can be improved or how we could utilize this. So please come and find me tonight or tomorrow, and I'd love to talk more about it.